Alright, I am back to mess up your childhoods even further with more Nickelodeon fan theories. What Nick show would you love to see make a comeback, by the way? Let me know in the comments. I'm your host James, and these are the top 10 evil Nickelodeon theories that will make you question everything. Part 2. And we're gonna kick off this list with a Jimmy Neutron fan theory. This one is pretty out there, but it's kind of fun. This theory attempts to explain why Jimmy is so dang smart and why all these crazy inventions he thinks up don't really get used by other people. Why isn't this kid and his friends Carl, Sheen, Cindy, and Libby famous and world-renowned? Well, as the theory suggests, maybe the kids have actually been genetically engineered, imbued with special abilities with the secret Area 51-esque base that exists in Retroville, Area 86. And as to why they were genetically engineered, it's because the military wants to cultivate their power, eventually using it for their own nefarious purposes. And as for the town of Retroville, well, it's all filled up with military personnel and government officials in disguise. That's why nobody seems to care or notice all the wild things Jimmy and his friends get up to. The town is basically one big testing ground, and everything our heroes come up against is an elaborate secret test in order to cultivate their special abilities. At number 9, we have a Courage the Cowardly Dog fan theory. The theory suggests that most of the events taking place in the show do happen, they're just severely warped. We're being shown a version of the events through the eyes of a dog. Now, I mean, this might seem pretty obvious, definitely is to me. I've always thought this was kind of what the show was about. More specifically, kind of an allegory for being a kid and just seeing how scary the world seems to us when we have no grasp on the world yet, how strange and confusing everything seems. But you could definitely watch this show and just take it all at face value as well and say, oh, everything that's happening in the cartoon is actually happening. But, you know, in terms of this theory, Courage is a scared, paranoid dog, loyal to his owners, and perceives everyone who shows up at the home to be a terrifying threat, even though, in reality, they may not be a threat at all. Almost like how some dogs just bark in defiance when you visit someone's house, or in Courage's case, just cower in the corner. Number 8, Hey Arnold should really be called Hey Helga. This is a pretty well-known one, and while I really wouldn't call it as much of a theory and more of an interesting observation, I still think it's worth talking about. So obviously the star of a show called Hey Arnold is Arnold, right? The football-headed freak. Well, not according to a lot of fans. To many, it's Helga who the story is really centered on, and I could definitely see that. I mean, just look at the iconic opening credits. Who's the first one to yell Arnold's name and then yell the name of the actual show? It's Helga. Almost every episode has Helga monologuing about her deep love for Arnold and lamenting at how she can't truly express to him how she feels. It almost feels like it's the overarching premise of the whole show. Will she ever profess her love for Arnold? And that, and who, you know, are Arnold's parents. She's a much more complex character than Arnold in a lot of ways, certainly more than all the other kids. There's more emotion and conflict going on with her, more than any other character outside of Arnold. Helga seems to be at the core of the show. Maybe an outwardly rude, a unibrow wearing girl named Helga just didn't seem as marketable as, you know, a sweet kid named Arnold with an oddly shaped head. Next, we have a Fairly Odd Parents conspiracy theory at number 7. Cosmo and Wanda don't exist. This one is honestly not that far-fetched. There are several rules and clues that point to this being the case in the series. First of all, adults aren't able to see fairies. That kind of points to this being the result of a young kid's overactive imagination. It also makes sense why Timmy would use his imagination to create two friends or parent figures. He's neglected at home and has to deal with his cruel babysitter Vicky. There are also a bunch of rules and stipulations about the wishes, but the primary ones are that you can't use a wish to win a competition, you can't use it to break or create true love, and you can't wish for cash. Basically, the wishes are all imaginary type stuff that doesn't have a direct effect on the real world. It's as if Timmy's wishes play out in this form of a fantasy. Next up, we have a Blue's Clues theory, that being that the entire series takes place in Steve's imagination, more specifically that he's an inmate of a mental institution. This one's pretty simple and silly. When you watch Blue's Clues, or when you used to watch Blue's Clues, I have a hard time imagining folks who regularly watch this channel also enjoy watching Blue's Clues anymore, but more power to you if you do. Start your morning off with some early 2000s children's programming boring, then watch some videos about cults and true crime. Anyway, you always see Steve moving through various rooms in his home, but he's not actually moving, he's just walking in place. And why is this? Well, the real reason is that it's all green screened, and that really helps save on budget. But another dark explanation could be afoot. Perhaps everything is just going on in Steve's head. He's just pacing back and forth in a padded cell. I kind of feel like I should be in a padded cell talking about this, but then again, maybe I am. At number 5, we have what I like to call the Aaahh! Real Monsters, Monsters Inc. connection. The idea is that these two properties take place within the same universe. And the fact of the matter is, no, they do not. One is a Disney Pixar property, the other is Nickelodeon. There will likely never be any kind of crossover between these two companies unless one buys the other. And that's cute. If Nickelodeon decides to buy Disney, that would have sounded like a crazy thing to suggest a few years back, but at the rate Disney's going right now, that could be a serious possibility. Anyway, maybe this theory could actually pan out in the future if that's the case. I mean, there are some very obvious similarities here. They both feature, monsters as the main cast. They scare people, and scaring people is a necessity for both squads of monsters. The monsters attend scare schools. It's a bit of an Ants and Bugs Life surface level type of comparison, but I could see it. At number 4, we have a Drake and Josh conspiracy. So this one connects the universes of Drake and Josh and iCarly, and Crazy Steve is the bridge that brings them together. Now, I didn't grow up watching these two shows, so I'm certainly not an expert on the intricacies of this complex web, but this one, it's one I've seen pop up online a number of times, so I think it's worth talking about. So in Drake and Josh, you had a recurring character named Crazy Steve, this unhinged man working at the movie theater who would have violent outbursts in a PG-friendly way, of course. Then you have Megan, Drake's younger sister, who went on to star in iCarly. Now, because Crazy Steve was played by Jerry Trainer, who played Carly's older brother in iCarly, a fan theory began floating around some years ago that perhaps Crazy Steve and Spencer Shea are actually the same character, and that Steve disposed of Drake and Josh, kidnapped Megan, changed their names, and began a new life in Seattle. I think a big part of this fan theory is that a lot of these live-action Nick shows do actually take place in the same universe. You got Sam and Cat, which is a spin-off of iCarly, and in Sam and Cat, Crazy Steve shows up. So it seems like there are quite a bit of fun connections you could make with this one. Next up, we have the Spongebob nuclear testing theory. This theory proposes that Bikini Bottom could be based on the real-life Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands, which endured several hydrogen bomb tests between 1946 and 1958. This resulted in the creatures of the sea becoming radioactive. Not in real life, in the world of this theory is what I'm saying. Which, in the world of cartoons, being radioactive means you have human level intelligence and capabilities now, aside from maybe Patrick. There's even someone who works or used to work on SpongeBob who chose to remain anonymous, who came out saying that this, as well as several other SpongeBob fan theories, are sometimes considered somewhat canon amongst the staff. And what really sold them on this particular theory was the episode where SpongeBob goes to rock bottom. One of my favorite ones. Here's a guy that's goes to that glove convention thing and he gets lost. Anyway, fans said that maybe this dark, nightmarish area could be the result of a giant crater left by one of the bombs. The fact is, all these theories are really just fun ideas, just a way of putting an often dark and disturbing twist on childhood classics for fun. Number 2, the Pigeon Man theory. Yeah, this episode, it's a tearjerker. Hey Arnold had a way of really hitting on some deeper themes in some episodes, for a kid's show anyway, and it was great because it never felt forced or contrived. Anyway, this theory is another one that honestly does kind of make sense. In the episode titled Pigeon Man faces rejection and ridicule from the people of the city, causing him to feel disconnected and disillusioned. And in the final scenes, Pigeon Man is seen leaping off the roof of a building with his pigeons flying alongside him into the sunset. Kind of a beautiful ending. Some have theorized, though, that the show's creators subtly implied more of a tragic end for Pigeon Man to highlight the seriousness of mental health issues and the impact of social isolation. Some fans believe that maybe Vincent, aka Pigeon Man, was a former soldier, maybe suffering from his tragic past, and the image of him flying into the sunset is kind of a symbolic representation of his desire to escape and find true happiness. There's an even darker theory that he actually jumped and took his own life, and Arnold conjured up the image of him floating away into the afterlife because he was just unable to kind of cope with what he saw. I kind of feel like that's in poor taste, so I much prefer the former, more ambiguous interpretation. And finally, we have the Stoop Kid, another Hey Arnold conspiracy. I think this one originally showed up on Reddit, thanks to user Saint Dominic. But in this theory, some fans speculate that Stoop Kid's constant presence on his stoop is not due to anxiety or childhood trauma, but because he's involved in illegal activities, specifically serving as a lookout for drug dealers in the building. This is one I could see being a thing. There are certain aspects of the character that could point to this. There's this kind of secrecy and mystery surrounding Stoop Kid's past and the fear he exhibits when people approach his stoop. Some fans argue that his behavior could be explained by him being involved in these criminal activities and wanting to avoid attention from law enforcement. And yeah, this one kind of makes sense. It's pretty obvious too that Arnold lives in a pretty rough neighborhood, so hey, who knows. With all that said, I've been your host James, and I'll catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.